5 Indian schools were named in the top 10 list for the world's best school prizes, and 1 Indian school became a top 3 finalist. These 5 schools are outliers, outstanding in their ability to put in place teaching practices and performance that impacts not just the lives of the students, but the communities. Making it to the shortlist itself meant demonstrating community collaboration, environmental action, innovation, overcoming adversity, and supporting healthy lives. That's not a small feat, given the fact that they come from a country that ranks among the top 5 economies in the world, but one that does poorly when it comes to educating its children. In a Swiss study conducted before the pandemic, India's education system ranked 43rd out of 64 major economies. It's clear that India needs a textbook to run better schools, and working towards that is T4 Education, the global platform that instituted the world's best school prizes. It is collaborating with these schools to develop transformational toolkits which provide step-by-step instructions on how other schools can replicate these models. Now more than ever before, we need better learning outcomes. The learning loss suffered by India's 320 million school-going children is severe after the pandemic kept them out of classrooms for more than 2 years. EdTech was started as a solution to bridge the learning gap, but in rural and semi-urban India, it was a cart without wheels. The World Bank says the share of children living in learning poverty was already at 53% before the pandemic. It could potentially reach 70% in a post-pandemic era. So how can India transform its education system and bring innovation and collaboration to learning? Hello and welcome to Young Turks, India's longest-running show on startups and entrepreneurship. I'm Shereen Bhan. Joining me on the show today, Vikas Pota, the founder and CEO of T4 Education, and 3 social innovation leaders that run 3 of the 5 Indian schools that have been shortlisted for the world's best school prizes. Kruti Bharucha of People, Saurabh Taneja of the Akanksha Foundation, and Rohit Kumar of the Apni Shala Foundation. Kruti, gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on the program, and congratulations to each one of you. But Saurabh, let me start by asking you, because Akanksha Foundation and your school did make it to the top 3 of the best schools list. And I have to say, I've been privileged to actually spend a day at one of the Akanksha Foundation schools. So particularly heartening to know that you've been able to achieve this feat. So Saurabh, let me start by asking you about this journey so far, but more importantly, in light of what the pandemic has done, the learning loss, but more importantly, the road ahead and the lessons to be learned. What has been the big change, the big shift?
Thanks a lot, Shereen, first and foremost, for spotlighting these stories of the stronger schools, as Vikas is very aptly amplifying and advocating for the same. Look, there are 2 or 3 big lessons that at least at Akanksha Foundation we are carrying forward post the pandemic. One is that the partnership with the parents and the community is of paramount importance. For Akanksha Foundation, this philosophy was always there, but more so in the last couple of years during the pandemic, it strengthened further. And we have seen its positive impact on our children, with 99% of them coming back to physical schools as soon as they reopen. So that's one. Second, I understand that there have been fairly too many limitations on tech integration in our schools. We still believe and are hopeful for a more positive and optimistic scenario with more of hybrid learning coming into place. And we are seeing its impact again in our spaces and in some of the spaces which are innovating in a very thoughtful way, without really diminishing the role of the educator or teacher, but really using technology to complement or supplement what the teachers do. And I think if we can combine these 2 aspects, we will be able to address the short-term learning losses that we have experienced during the pandemic, Shri.
Yes, collaboration with the community is going to be of utmost importance. But let me bring Vikas into the conversation. Vikas, thanks very much for joining us. I want to understand from you, what drove you to start T4 Education through the course of the pandemic? Your attempt is to try and bring together schools, to try and bring together educators from around the world to navigate the new normal. What's the experience been so far, Vikas, for you?
Thank you so much for this opportunity, and congratulations to all the schools who are present here today. Shereen, that's a really important question. And, I'm sure, like many of you in India, I receive a lot of presentations on the future of education, which actually drive me mad. And because what I believe the future of education is, and what the pandemic demonstrated, is quite simply the need to have better schools and to invest in institution building. And so what the world's best prizes are is a mechanism for surfacing best practices from schools such as who are represented here today. Because I believe that we have lots to learn to make sure that schools around the world can improve. And when you talk about the learning loss in India, let me just tell you, there are almost 500 million children today around the world in failing schools, as reported by their own governments. And so we just need to do a better job in that. And the mechanism is one effort in trying to surface in best practices from schools around the world so that others can get inspired, can learn, can share, can collaborate, and all these wonderful things that can flow from that. And so that's what the motivation of the World's Best School Prizes is.
Well, thanks very much for sharing that with us, and you're absolutely right. The effort needs to be on how we can learn from these experiences. More importantly, how can we scale and replicate these models? But Kruti, let me come to you and understand what's happening as far as people's efforts are concerned. Now, you've been working in Delhi. You've also been working with the state government of Madhya Pradesh. To start with, Kruti, education and a bulk of driving education is still dependent on government schools and government infrastructure. How crucial is it going to have to be for the private sector, for the social sector, to continue to deepen its partnership, collaborate with the government to try and improve the quality of learning, to improve the quality of education in government schools? And how open are state governments at this point in time to this idea? You're working with two state governments, Delhi and Madhya Pradesh. What's the experience been like, Kruti?
Well, I think just on your first question, I think it's going to be critical to work with the government. There are about 150 million children that study in more than 1 million government schools, and often these children are from the poorest and most vulnerable communities. So if we really are serious about transforming the state of education in the country, we must do it through the government school system and system strengthening of government schools. I think there are a lot of opportunities now. Governments are extremely open to having non-state actors and non-profits come in to support particular interventions and to actually improve the system. I think what's critical in making a government partnership successful is really co-developing and co-designing those solutions with the government, rather than taking a particular solution that an organization believes in and then kind of going in and trusting it on a large government's school system. So there are constraints. There are cost constraints, there are budget constraints, there are staffing constraints within government schools. Many schools are, small schools, across the countryside in India. Some of them have only 50 students, 1 to 2 teachers. And so those are the realities of what we are dealing with when we are actually looking at working with a mix of rural and urban schools. It's very important to keep in mind the constraints, the real constraints that governments face. It's equally important to identify champions of change at the state government and national government level, and to work very closely to actually supplement their efforts and not substitute their efforts. So as an organization, that's something that we really believe in, that it's important to really be a thought partner, an implementation support partner, and also through our school in Delhi, to actually show what is possible.
You're absolutely right in pointing out that there are constraints which are real constraints that one has to learn to navigate and live with. But Rohit, that's exactly the point that I want to address with you and your experience at Apni Shala, because you're also collaborating with about 20 plus government schools. To Kruti's points, these are real challenges, whether it's budgetary constraints or staffing constraints. How do you ensure that you do, in her words, supplement government's efforts as opposed to substituting them? And what is the ideal model going forward on how we can actually take these successful models and replicate them across different parts of the country? Rohit.
Thank you, Shereen, and thank you, Vikas, for this experience of going through the prize, because that definitely gave us a lot of reflections. One, I think, absolutely agree with Kruti in understanding that governments are open, they are engaging and opening up more and more dialogue here. What we are also understanding is that what is the type of school we are trying to kind of replicate, and when we are thinking about education, what is the core piece that education is missing at this point. So when we went into schools in 2013, when we started Apni Shala's work, what we noticed was that there is some academic work that is already happening. There is some physical development work that is already happening. But what was missing in schools was that social and emotional development piece. And that's exactly what Apnishala said, that we don't want to start doing what the government schools are already doing, but how can we bring in what is not there? And there is enough and more research that says that without social and emotional development, without well-being, learning of any sorts cannot happen. You can have the best teacher in a math classroom, but if the child has experienced abuse in the house or is hungry right now, they cannot learn. And that's when bringing in education and mental health together was very, very critical. And that's the experiment we are hoping to do with Coach, that can Coach become that model school within the government school system that showcases how this work can happen. And then when there's a model that is already existing, and slowly building that relationship on ground with teachers, with principals, with parents, then it has a better buy-in.